We're going to move to the panel debate now and then hear from the Mirror Group a little bit later, sometime after coffee. My name is Jackie Davis. I will be moderating our panel debate and aiming to ensure we have a very lively and active, just under 60 minutes, hopefully with time for some comments and questions from all of you as well. One thing I've been asked to say before we start, if you're tweeting, there is a request. Could you please use the hashtag Photonics21 tweet hash thing, whatever it is, she says, sounding like a Luddite, because then everybody will be able to find your tweets easily. The title of this panel debate is Photonics and How to Accelerate Innovation in Europe. As Martin said earlier, he pointed out that the European Commission Vice President Nelly Kroes, who you're going to hear from later, has already and many times highlighted the huge impact that photonics is having and can have in the future. And policymakers, as we've heard, recognise this by making it a key enabling technology. Policymakers have also stressed the importance of research and innovation as the key to Europe's recovery and future competitiveness. So the questions we want to address in this panel are, how can that innovation best be fostered across industry as a whole, and most specifically in the photonics sector? And what are the key planks of an innovation strategy that can create the best possible environment to borrow a quote, again, that Martin mentioned earlier from Malcolm Harbour, who I'll introduce in a moment. He said in a recent article, to make Europe the photonics champion of the world. Put it another way, how do we make the most of those big opportunities that Giorgio was talking about? So, that's what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to ask our panel to come and join me on stage now. And I'm delighted to welcome, I just mentioned him, Malcolm Harbour MEP, who is chair of the European Parliament's Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee, Dr. Zoran Stancic, who is Deputy Director General in the Directorate General for the Information Society and Media in the European Commission, and the other two you've heard of before, but let me introduce them properly, Martin Gürtzler, COO of OSRAM and President of Photonics 21, and Giorgio Anania, who is chair of Cube Optics, Vice President of Photonics 21, and a member of the Commission's high-level group for key enabling technologies. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Now, as I say, we only have just under an hour for this debate, so no opening remarks. We're going to jump straight into the discussion. And I want to start really with that key question, which is, what do you believe are the key drivers for innovation? Yes, more broadly for industry as a whole, but specifically for this very important sector. And what do you see as the key issues we need to address? Malcolm, perhaps I could ask you to come in first.
Well, thank you very much, Jackie. Well, it's a special pleasure to be here because I've been at a number of the Photonics 21 meetings since it started, and it's grown fantastically. And I think we saw the chart earlier on. For me, the issue now is not so much about generating innovation, because I think Photonics has already demonstrated that he has the ideas and the research coming through. The big issue for the next decade is how we translate that innovation into new products, new services, new businesses, wealth generation, and globally dominating product sectors. I mean, that's the longer term challenge. And I think that the photonics industry actually is a real demonstrator for many other sectors in showing how it can be done by engaging all of you in that process. And also the leverage from the public-private partnership, which I was delighted to host a lunch in the European Parliament a few months ago when we launched the idea. So all of that, I think, is really important. And finally, I'd like to come back to this later. The one thing that's missed off from here, and in your paper about the PPP, is how we engage public procurement and public customers. And that, for me, is the one crucial missing link across all of that, which in your product sectors, if you look at them, in areas like medical technologies, lighting, low energy, has fantastic potential. And I would like you to be a leader in that particular policy stream as well. And that would help me because that's one of my great enthusiasms.
Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, I don't need that. Zoran, if I could turn to you next. Would you agree with Malcolm the key challenge here is the translation of excellent science to market? And Horizon 2020 does try to address this issue specifically. Perhaps you could highlight some of the ways it's doing that.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm delighted to be here with you today. I fully agree with what Malcolm said. However, I think when we talk about the innovation in Europe, we have first to take a holistic view, which means let's not first talk about photonics, but what are the overall challenges which Europe is facing in the domain of innovation. The way we see it is, first of all, we have to have the proper environment which is innovation friendly. What does it mean? It means we have to have proper people with proper skills, a lot of engineers, scientists, so everyone who can contribute from the grassroots to the innovation. Second thing, we have to have the really, to some extent also new values in Europe. Values of taking risks, taking chances. So in that respect, I think it's important to recognize that these things cannot be changed from today to tomorrow. We have to have a longer-term policy vision and then a series of concrete actions on European level up to the regional and local level, which would create this kind of open innovation market in Europe. So from that perspective, now I'll focus more on what Europe is doing in this respect. Europe has now tabled the proposal for Horizon 2020. And in the Horizon 2020, this is exactly what we are trying to do from the perspective of narrow research and innovation part. What we try to create are actually appropriate actions for funding research and innovation in a holistic approach, which would help create European innovation and research area. Of course, we will not be able to achieve it alone. So from that perspective, it is crucial. We need a strong partnership from the society, partnership and leadership from the industry in specific areas. And we want to use Horizon 2020 for achieving that. Now, to focus even more on what we expect from industry, it is clear if you want to have the innovative society and an open society, we have to have industry which will be able to participate in this. So what do we need? We have to have industry with a clear ambition. We have to have also industry with a clear vision for the future. And at the same time, we will be able to be innovative only if we have industrial leadership in specific domains. So by working together, we can create a real entrepreneurial spirit which will be able then to achieve results in this specific domain.
Thank you very much. Martin, if I could turn to you there next. So Zoran talked there about an innovation-friendly environment. He said what he wanted from you. Perhaps I could ask you what you see as the key elements of an innovation-friendly environment, and perhaps what do you want from him?
I think this is a good question because if I follow the discussion, we have basically the expectation that the industry is basically competitive, has a clear vision on what they do. This is a must in order to survive for us. Yeah? So innovation is here, our lifeblood, I always say. Yeah? In order to be successful, and when we discuss today Europe, we are in competition with other regions. And what we also expect basically from the other side is basically to be competitive on the bodies we have also from the, let's say, governmental side with other countries which have similar programs in place in order to make us successful as well. So this is something which concerns speed, which concerns what we talked about, the move from research to innovation. This is something where I would have a request that we create and that we have the structures which are really competitive with countries like China, with countries like Japan or Korea. So this is what my request to this.
Thank you. Giorgio, would you agree that the valley of, with Malcolm's point, particularly about the valley of death problem, and as we discussed, Horizon 2020 does have some key proposals in order to bridge that gap. Do you think EU policies are moving in the right direction? And what for you, same question really, what for you are the key elements of an environment that is truly friendly to innovation?
I'm extremely pleased with the changes that are going on with Horizon 2020. I think after 20 years of seeing things go in a way that I thought was suboptimal, I think we're definitely hitting the nail on the head. It is definitely spending the money smarter and in the right way. However, financing is a little bit of the pie, and I think our much bigger battle than we have is to create an environment that's suitable for technology. In Europe, we don't have an environment suitable for technology. Technology has to be able to move up, down, sideways, grab the opportunities. We have a slow-moving structure. I closed a round of financing for a new company I'm starting last week. It was a year of negotiations. I'm not sure I would ever do it again. Everything seems to be done to slow small companies down. We have a ton of technology. What we need is simplification. Simplification doesn't cost anything. It doesn't go in European budgets. You know, everyone's happy when you add jobs, but if you take them away, no one wants you to do it. So if you're a small company, you die. It's a bit of a problem once you're dead. Okay? So I think everything in photonics that we're doing right now, I'm very pleased that it's going in the right direction. A couple of messages. So one is We're saying CETs are the future for Europe. Look at the budget. It's still less than $1 billion a year for all 6 CETs. All right? If you divide that by 6, that's, it comes up to about 100 million per photonics. I mean, I'm planning on the little company I just started to spend 6 billion in R&D the first year. That's 6% of all that Europe will invest in photonics throughout all the countries. So it's not quite at the right level to make an impact. But secondly, and this is not something the EU can change, it depends on the countries, the environment in Europe just needs to evolve. I mean, when I was CEO of Bookham, we tried to buy a company that had activities in Italy, and I said the usual thing, okay, we have research, so I assume we're going to move it over to our Shenzhen facility. As you know, we looked at the costs, and the R&D guys in Europe, in Italy, were the same price as the ones in China. China does not win because of low cost. Let's stop saying that. China wins because things go fast.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because I want to give our 2 policymakers a chance to react. I mean, he said there very bluntly, we don't have an environment suitable for technology. I want to ask you, A, do you think he has a point? And if he does, what can be done, particularly with reference, the EU recognised photonics as a key enabling technology. The high-level group said what they thought that meant, more focus, more rebalancing of resources. What does it mean to you in terms of enabling them to play that role? Who would like to come in first? Malcolm?
Well, I mean, I think he's exactly right. And I think that is now the task for policymakers. I mean, I agree about the balance of funding. And I think one of the strong messages from Key Enabling Technologies report is that we do need to shift some funding towards that deployment, that knowledge transfer stage. And that's something that I think the Parliament will look at very strongly. Remember, Horizon 2020 is with the Parliament at the moment. And so you need to make that strong point to my colleagues on the Industry Committee who are looking at the budget. But I think that the broader issue which you're talking about is the whole business environment for starting up companies quickly, for setting up companies in such a way that they can receive financing, about tax incentive for research and development. Now, all of those things are actually down to individual member states, largely. And I think one of the things that the Commission needs to step up, it's already doing it to some extent, is to provide some clear benchmarking figures we can use to put peer pressure at a prime ministerial level on countries who are not moving forward. But you can make change quickly. I mean, I think that Mario Monti, who many of us know from here, is already making changes in Italy far more quickly than any prime minister that we've seen recently. I'm interested to get your perspective on that. But it shows what you can do if you have a drive behind it. And I just think my final point, and you'll think I'm I'm repeating this, but actually I do think that deployment of technology by public authorities in a highly visible way to communities where they actually see the new technology, whether it's in medical devices, whether it's in new street lighting, for heaven's sake. I mean, it's actually a very powerful and demonstrable way of showing energy saving, is actually very popular. And what we need to do is to get policymakers and public investors to be far more enthusiastic about technology because it's popular with citizens to invest in new technology. It may be a bit more risky. But in the days where we have public support for tackling climate change, I think we have to change the perception of people who are making political decisions about the importance of developing technology in the money that they're spending on our behalf.
Thank you. And that's a theme very much that has been echoed by Commissioner Nelly Kroes, who has talked a lot, and we heard about it earlier, of the need to advocate and to sell the success stories. Martin mentioned it earlier. Perhaps we can come back on that. But Zoran, if I could come to you, do you accept some of the criticism that Giorgio is making? And also, could you perhaps address one other point, which is we heard from Luisa just now about regional policy, cohesion funding, and a pot of money there for research and innovation and for small and medium-sized enterprises that is the same as the whole of Horizon 2020. My question would be, do you think we are now achieving the sort of joined-up thinking between the two, so the strategic focus is clear across all your policy areas?
Thank you very much for this. To some extent, I fully agree with what has been said before. It's very clear that we have now, for the first time, put CAT on the top of the policy agendas. So I think this was not the case before. So let's recognize it. It's a major achievement in European policies. Now to look in more focus in Horizon 2020 and the funding aspect, I mean, yes, of course, funding helps. It's important to have substantial money for funding research and innovation. However, as it was recognized, it's not enough. What we need to have is proper environment, and on European policy level, what we need to do is bring all these different policy actions together, from structure funds through innovation, research, up to investments, public procurement policies, and so on. So I think through that, we can really start helping creating the environment in which these technologies could flourish. Now, I want at the same time to insist that we will not make it a success if you will just point to the European Commission. It is essential, or even if you want on European Union bodies alone, we will be successful only if we make all different stakeholders working together. So what do we expect from the industry? Industry needs to invest in growth, in jobs, in high quality jobs here in Europe. Without industrial commitment to continue producing new jobs and new products, of course, and services here in Europe, European Union bodies cannot do much. Even if you mentioned also specific actions on a number of member states, it's clear that member states have to be proactive in this respect together. So one of the messages which we would like to get out on this kind of events is, I mean, this public-private partnership. It's not just a partnership between European Commission and big industry. We have to work to see how we can engage with other players, meaning with the society at large. We have to see how we can engage with small and medium-sized companies who, I mean, you mentioned, for example, simplification. Yes, we need more simple approaches, but if we will do it only from Brussels, I mean, you know, we have 5,000 SMEs who are working in this specific domain. I'm sure that all of them will not be able to access funds which would be directly funded from the European Commission. So we have to see how to engage them at the same time to introduce new simple instruments in supporting them, bringing new products and services to the market.
And this question, before I come to the other two, of joined up thinking, do you think now innovation, there are two big pots of money for research and innovation, is the link between the two going to work effectively?
We got a very clear demand from our commissioners that we have to work together. We already started working together quite intensively in the context of the 7th Framework Programme and existing cycle of the structural funds. I think we got very clear guidelines on how to work together in this respect. With smart specialization, I think we are making this demand even stronger. So it goes without saying that we will be accountable in this respect, and we have to deliver.
Thank you very much.
Jackie, can I just add one quick
Very
point?
briefly, because I want to come to the other two.
Because member states are also investing in photonics, and I think this is a crucial point. And of course, the ERDF money is leveraged by contributions from member state agencies.
Yes.
And I think the fact that you together are setting a clear strategy means we will get a better coordination from member states, but we do need to keep an eye on that.
Okay, so what the coordination at EU level actually hopefully will permeate down and work at all levels. Number of issues you raised there, small and medium-sized enterprises, you say, key role in the sector, 5,000 companies, partnerships. I'd like to come to those in a moment, but just to come back on the point that Malcolm made at the outset about this gap between science and the market. I know it's an issue that concerns Photonics 21 very much. Giorgio, for you, what is the key? I mean, this was described by the KETS high-level group, I think, as the weakest link in the innovation chain. How do we strengthen that link in future? What's the key for you?
My name is Martin.
I know, sorry, I looked at you. Thought Martin, said Giorgio. Alzheimer moment. Sorry, apologies for that.
First of all, I would like to come back. I think, first of all, Photonics 21 is really a group of organizations which cover all what was said by Mr. Stanic. This is, I think, the starting point. Second, I think, as Giorgio said, we are on a great way now with the Horizon 2020. But there are still a lot of obstacles we can do even better, and this is what we addressed, and was also what Giorgio addressed. So if we want to be successful, from my perspective, to bridge that gap between research and innovation, we address right now the right things. For example, let's do a couple of examples. In Europe, to a certain degree, we still see hesitation, we see skepticism about new technologies. Here, really, demonstration projects, as you described, it's not just about street lighting. We have so many cases in the medical area, there are so many possibilities in order to overcome that barrier and to be in the lead at the end, and to make it basically a popular technology. And we see that in so many countries, yeah, where you see, for example, Korea and China, my industry, where they say, we want to have LED penetration of whatever, 80% in a couple of years. This is something which is driven also, let's say, together, industry and government. The other aspect, I would say, always helps is public procurement. Yeah? If we have so many people working in the public area, if they all are connected to these new technologies, they will also be a multiplier for others. So this public procurement process has an impact. And then it's also, and we cannot take, it's our responsibility as industry to create the markets as well. And sometimes it's not easy, but sometimes it's also our fault that we don't move fast enough and that we don't also inform sufficiently. So there are several aspects, but if we can do more, and this is in the Horizon 2020, I think a major point now towards deployment, towards demonstration projects, towards also, let's say, public procurement. If this is part of the chain, that will help also the industry besides their own tasks. And I'm not discounting here that we have a lot of our things on our plate as well. But, and this I want to re-emphasize again, we are discussing here a competition not within Europe, but with other regions. And many of the people here, they are mobile, many of the companies are mobile, so the question is how can we create the value and the know-how in this region?
And keep them in Europe. Giorgio, a thought from you on that, then I'm coming out towards
I'd like to violently agree, and I think Malcolm started a train of violent agreement on public procurement. 2020 is tomorrow morning. We're saying we want to have an impact on jobs. If we start something at the research stage now, it'll barely start creating, the first job in 2020. So we need to prime the pump. Public procurement can be a massive help in that. Give you an example. In China, they've decided that LEDs are important. They want to dominate the world in photovoltaics. The next thing is they want to dominate the world in LEDs. And they've said, right, public procurement for street lighting from now on will be LEDs. Right. Now, everyone hears that. The whole value chain starts getting organized. You've taken the risk out of it. You know it will happen. Now you don't need to decide who gets what money. Everyone knows there's going to be a big pull towards putting in street lighting based on LEDs, and the value chain self-organizes, right? So for me, pump priming is critical if we're going to move this beast at any reasonable speed.
Okay, thank you. Malcolm, you wanted to come in.
Well, I mean, just quickly to say to you that on the table of my committee at the moment is a major reform of public procurement, including an entirely new instrument to encourage the adoption of innovation. So we are acting on that in terms of a legal framework for public procurement, which has really not encouraged innovation at all. Now, but what we need is your support for that. So, because I think that you can lead on that in some areas. So I think that's something that in your PPP ideas, we should perhaps talk about how you can train and develop, and we can give you the ideas to go in to talk to public customers about it.
Thank you. Zoran, a quick word on this question of keeping photonics industry, keeping manufacturing in Europe, keeping the know-how in Europe. Could you just react to what Martin said earlier?
I think it's, industry, of course, makes decisions on the basis of potential markets, and of course, you are in that respect fully independent. It's very important to recognize that it is up to public policymakers to provide the proper environment so you would be able to make the right decisions, meaning that you would create good jobs, good high-quality jobs here in Europe. However, at the same time, I recognize that there are a lot of opportunities out there. So what we need to do on the international arena is get a clear message from you which are the obstacles, which are the problems which you are facing as industry when having the outreach in the third countries. So from that perspective, what we have decided at DG IMSO recently is to engage with you because we have regular dialogues with all key players all over the world. So I think in that respect, what we would like to learn from you is which are concrete problems which you have, for example, regarding the market access in the domain of information and communication technologies, in such respect that we will be able to support you when, of course, you will be reaching out there in those countries. From that perspective, my colleagues have already written to representatives, and we have very high expectations also for Photonics 21 to participate in this kind of dialogues.
So you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen, they want your help. Lots of issues still to cover, small and medium-sized enterprise, partnerships. I'd also like to touch on the issue of skills if we have time. But let me see, would anybody like to you can make a brief comment, it doesn't have to be a question. Does anybody want to join in the discussion at this stage? Do I see a hand? No? Okay, well, I'll give you another opportunity in a moment if you'd like to think about it for a second. But let's go back to this question of small and medium-sized enterprises. And Giorgio, let me start with you this time, because subject close to your heart, I know. A lot of initiatives from the Commission has emphasised the role of SMEs in terms of economic recovery, in terms of Europe's future competitiveness. Do you think they're now doing the right things? You talked earlier about the speed at which decisions are made, but are they putting in place the key elements that will really help SMEs play this role, or for you, is there something missing?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I can say that there's a ton of technologies. When companies start being set up, it's still very, very difficult in Europe to get access to financing. There's a lot of R&D contributions. So suppose you're trying to raise 5 million. Now you get R&D contributions from outside, and so they cover half the cost. You still need to raise 2.5 million. And the problem is, you spend a year trying to raise 5 million. If you get subsidies for half of it, you spend a year trying to raise 2.5 million. You're still spending a year. We need to find mechanisms to make startups easier to do, because I don't believe there's a problem with risk-taking in Europe. I just think there's a problem to very difficult access to money. And of course, and I don't want to repeat myself, the environment is such that the rigidities of Europe, which can be handled by a large company, at the small company level, just make it very complex. It just make it very complex. So the simplification is very, very hard.
We are back to my topic on competition. If he goes with the same company to California, he finds investors immediately. So the point is really, how can we create this fertile ground? And the second point, we cannot stress it enough. To prepare a 100-page paper for the European Commission, and then you have a 15% hit rate, this is not possible for small companies. Forget it. Then, so therefore, we need to find different ways and more lean structure.
So the European Commission has come up with some proposals on venture capital. Do you think they will address this problem adequately enough? Zoran.
Let me, first, before I go to the venture capital on the funding of the projects, we fully recognize what has been stated, and in order to prepare ourselves for Horizon 2020, where we want to have leaner and faster instruments, we are already within the existing rules, within the existing running 7 framework program, trying to explore possibilities of how to engage with SMEs in faster and leaner way. So what we are planning to do is, already for the last year of the implementation of the 7th framework program, we want to launch a call for project proposals also in the domain of photonics, where we actually want to experiment in how to create this more dynamic environment for SMEs. Now, it goes without saying that we will not be able to have a full outreach for all SMEs. I mean, inherently, European projects where there are requirements for larger consortia with larger players is a complex environment. So what we have to do is to see how we can, what are the tasks which need to be done here from Brussels, what needs to be done on the regional level, how we can engage with the local community, and therefore this approach really provide proper support for SMEs as well. Now, regarding the venture capital, I fully recognize what has been stated, and I fully subscribe to that as well. In that respect, we are launching already, Vice President Cruz has already been engaged with a series of meetings with people working in the domain of venture capital in order to see how we can actually create an environment which would be user-friendly, not only in the domain of photonics, but in general in the domain of the digital agenda as such. Goes without saying that there is a role to be played by the public authorities, but of course, we have to look at the general environment as well.
Thank you. Malcolm, just a reaction as well to what Giorgio said. It's not a lack of risk-taking, which is commonly we debate why are we risk-averse compared with the Americans. He's saying we aren't risk-averse, we just can't get the money.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my first comment. I mean, I think if you look at Silicon Valley characteristically, I mean, why is it that you can go and get those innovations funded? Because you have venture capital companies there who are specializing in the whole area that Silicon Valley is good at. Many of them have grown up and worked on projects. They recognize the value of an innovation. And it seems to me that what we're looking for, and let's take photonics as an example. I mean, essentially, you've created a cluster to make photonics a European cluster. Now, part of the public-private partnership work, I think, has to be to try and find a way of bringing in the specialists, the venture capital providers who understand the photonics business, the value of the innovations that are coming forward, and actually can evaluate that risk in a more appropriate way in order to help you draw down the funding. And that I think is a big task, but I think the Commission, together with you, should be working up on some of those sort of ideas. I mean, I think having venture capital funding just specializing in the digital agenda is not specialist enough, because there are so many areas of that. But because you've been working on the long-term agenda for research, that should be giving investors much more confidence than in sectors that haven't actually done that sort of process. So you need to leverage what you've achieved since 2006 in trying to provide that specialist source of funding. Now, because of the European instruments that's coming forward, that means that the photonics venture capital operation should be able to operate all over Europe, which it hasn't been able to for the first time because there have been different regulations in different countries. So all of those things are important. And just finally, on the question about SME access, I mean, we are trying to work, and this is certainly true at a parliamentary level, and the Commission is supporting that, to try and ensure that every instrument we're working on, we simplify access for small enterprises. Public procurement, again, is a classic example. The reform of public procurement will dramatically reduce the cost of SMEs actually putting tenders in for public procurement contracts. The Horizon 2020 application conditions. I mean, everybody knows that in many cases people have been deterred from engaging in framework program projects because of the bureaucracy. The management time that small companies have to put in does not justify the return. We're aware of that. The Commission knows that. We have to get our colleagues on the Budgetary Control Committee to work with us on that, because a lot of it's because of past funding problems,
sure,
or budgets accounts not being signed off. We have to find a better balance in here somewhere.
Okay, thank you. Come back on this partnership issue in a moment, but let me just first see if there are any questions or comments from the... Hold on just a second, I'm going to come among you, and it would be very helpful if you could say who you are, who you represent, and please be brief so we can hopefully squeeze in a few. Sir.
Carlos Lee from Industry Association SEMI, 2,000 members, of which 85% are SMEs. My question is to how extent it's indeed made easier for the SMEs. So I'm Brussels-based, so I know about the work. You write reports, lengthy reports, responses. The EU, you wrote the whole thing on the cutting the red tape. You had the Small Business Act. And I would like to know to what extent you, or whoever has the answer here, to what extent you then measure the result down the road. If I was to survey my members, has this administration been easier now versus 5 years ago? I don't know what answer I would get from them, but are you measuring this red tape and all of these things that you've talked about at top level? How are you measuring the impact down the road?
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. While I'm down here, are there any more, it can be comments, as well as where, Malcolm? Thank you very much. Right down here as well. Thank you, sir.
John Lincoln, the South of England Photonics Network. As Europe moves to trying to fund the Valley of Death and look at initiatives to support bridging the Valley of Death, we're getting much closer to supporting competitive rather than pre-competitive R&D. Will the drive to keep things pre-competitive hamper our ability to really support people bridging the Valley of Death?
Thank you very much indeed. Any more before I come back? Malcolm, you're doing a marvellous job. Thank you very much. Please, sir. Thank you.
I'd like to have a comment on the broadband speed and availability throughout Europe, because you can be trained, you can work, you can develop, and access and a suitable access to the network is actually extremely important. Photonics is a key for this, also as enabling technology. Huge amount of jobs behind it. Europe is falling behind, and there is a lot of discussion starting from, regulations down, like your comment, because this, in terms of job creations and, technology development and photonics, can be spelled out in many ways. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll squeeze one more in if we have one. Are you putting your hand up, sir? Yes. Please.
Great question for the Commission, for Malcolm. Did you ever think of a possibility of adding to the funding process, for example, putting up tax reductions for SMEs in the research and development area? That would be a big carrot that wouldn't cost too much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's come back on those issues. And if we could address perhaps the SME-related questions first. Are you measuring the results of what you do? And would you consider measures like tax reduction? Malcolm, it was specifically to you. You first, then Zoran, then I'll come to the others, and then we'll come back to the other questions.
Well, I mean, these are questions that are absolutely on the nub of a whole series of public policy issues. So if I run through them very, very quickly, and we can perhaps come back on them later. I mean, I agree that tax incentives for investing in research and development are absolutely crucial, but of course they are the responsibility of governments. And that comes back to the broader question that we raised earlier about benchmarking between countries. And I think many governments, including my own in the UK now, and we persuaded the Chancellor to actually work on that, and I think we're already seeing some impact of that in investment being made in R&D. I don't say that the problem is solved, but we need to work on that very clearly. Now, I mean, on the broader question about analysing the administrative burden, I mean, I think this is a major weakness of the European process. And we've consistently asked for this from a parliamentary point of view, for the Commission to benchmark its administrative burdens and show how the costs are being removed. Now, there is some data around that, and there have been some improvements, but actually we have a lot further to go. And I think that will be something that we need to work with SMEs on. I think, frankly, we've promised a lot, but we've delivered little on burdens reduction. And governments have to, government regulation, how governments implement European regulation, the dreaded gold plating of regulation, which goes on everywhere, is something that we do have to tackle. So again, this is a shared enterprise. It's not just about European level. On broadband, well, this is something that again, Parliament's given a lot of priority to. I think we're at a very delicate stage at the moment because we are in danger of not getting enough operators to invest with some public subvention in key areas. And of course, we want to deploy your technology as soon as possible to do that, and the next generation fibre technology. I think you should address that question to Mrs. Cruz when she comes, because that is her key responsibility.
I'm not sure she has time for Q&A, but we can try it.
I'm sure that you should just hand her a note when she comes in. And finally, I think there's a very perceptive question about this distinction between pre-competitive and competitive. And this is a highly sensitive issue, because I think that in terms of direct grant, obviously, for competitive research, this is already all absolutely covered by state aid criteria, which is always very difficult for public authorities. And so therefore, I think that it's going to have to be forms of supporting loan capital in other areas. I mean, there are things like infrastructure and other support that you can give in terms of business parks and so on. But that will continue to be an issue that we'll need to watch very carefully.
Thank you. Zoran, if you could also pick up on that point, crucially, and perhaps a word, because broadband obviously very dear to your heart, a word on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think all the questions were really important. I'll kick off with the issue of measuring the administrative burden. We did, I think DG RTD subcontracted a study where actually they tried to measure what is the financial implication or how much does it cost to write a report. And I think the results are quite worrying, because it's clear indication that we have to do more and better in order to reduce the cost and also to have the broader access to EU funding. At the same time, I think I do not want to accept the statements that nothing has been done in the domain of the simplification. This is simply not true. I mean, simplification is on the agenda of the Commission for last 20 years. And for example, and one has to recognize that there is a progress. There is a progress. This progress can be measured very clearly also through time to contract. If you measure how much time does it take from the time when the calls for project proposals is closed until the contracts are signed, I think you can clearly demonstrate that there is a progress. Now, at the same time, let's be frank, is this progress good enough? We should do better and we should do more. And Commissioner Maura Geoghegan-Quinn very clearly stated about the benchmark. She said when the proposal for Horizon 2020 was adopted that she wants the time to contract to be reduced for 100 days. And I know that she will be accountable for that. So what we as services we have to do is see how we can build on experience which we have regarding the reduction of administrative burden up to now, and at the same time to be innovative, how we can really provide a more dynamic and more open approach. Now, what we count is we want to have a strong support from the budgetary authority. So we count on support from the Parliament, because only by working together, I mean, at the same time, let's recognize financial regulation were tabled as a proposal last year. Now we are looking at what will come out as a discussion of the financial regulation. I think our expectations would be that we will have a more flexible approach. This is not what we're going to get. So for me, it's, I cannot commit myself that I will be more fast if, if my hands are tied. So we have to have the proper environment which will help us take high risk, be more dynamic, and only by that we can.
Okay.
We
Two
can
words
deliver.
briefly, if you would, on this question of competitive versus pre-competitive.
With pre-competitive, we do not have in the Commission much experience right now. In Horizon 2020, we very clearly stated that we want to have more opportunities for pre-competitive and also funding and supporting pre-competitive procurement to a large extent. So we are already looking at how to explore this, maybe even in the last year of the implementation of the 7th framework program. However, these are new areas, and only by working together with local authorities we can actually see how to make it happen. Now, I just want to make two more.
Very brief,
I'll try to be very brief. First, on the tax reduction. I mean, if you read the analysis of for example, OECD, it's questionable if you can really, if you can prove that tax reductions are leading to towards more innovative and more dynamic society. Just to give you the example of, for example, Finland, if one would say, okay, what is most innovative society or one of the most innovative societies or countries in Europe, one would say Finland. Finland doesn't have very big tax incentives.
Okay.
So what I'm trying, of course, it's not in the hand of the European Commission, it's the issue of the member states. What we would like to do is share the knowledge, share the experience, and see how we can do better and more also in this respect. Now, on the broadband, I fully agree with what has been stated. We have to see, Thierry van der Pil already mentioned the Connecting Europe facility, but we have to see also how we can provide proper demand. And what is on the side of the European Commission and on the member states is, can we have a more friendly e-procurement procedures which will help SMEs to apply for the to make bid for public funding of the procurement.
Okay, Zoran, I'm going to have to stop you there because we're getting close to out of time, and we haven't talked about one of the most important issues. You've mentioned it, and I wanted to get a reaction from industry on this question of partnership. Today is a milestone event in terms of the development of the public-private partnership. The word partnership has come up time and again. My question really, Martin, to you and then to Giorgio is, Zoran said earlier, it shouldn't just be big industry commission. We need to engage other players. Do you agree that that is absolutely essential? And going forward, what do you think is the key support that policymakers can give you to really make sure that this delivers? Is it, again, do we go back to the numbers, is it money or is it other things to really make this PPP deliver? Martin.
As I said before, I think the approach of photonics was exactly directed to this, to have a broad range of groups, of companies, of universities, research institutes. And that's also the basis how we do basic research today. Yeah? It's based on groups and conglomerates, small, whether you have universities collaborating, financial institutions, big companies, small companies. It's always basically a team approach, a partnership. And the results also belong to the partnership. And therefore, I think the approach on the basic research is here the right one. Now the question is, how can we move that basically downstream? This is, I believe, the major. It works, I would say, on the research side. And now the question is, how can we make it downstream? And this is clearly not a simple answer here, because you're coming into this competitive position. You have clearly regulations in the EU where, for example, if you talk about procurement and so on, you have to follow certain rules. You cannot just dedicate certain funds to certain companies. So there might be a certain tendering process. The question is, how can we align this? And here, from my perspective, as I see it, we have some good first steps, for example, in lighting. Let's take a topic like organic LED. Yeah? Here, it's not just a matter of a few global companies working on the lighting side, but it's also including smaller but also bigger companies and universities on the material side, on the pre-components. So it's really a group of organizations and companies working together and bringing them together and making basically technology happen. And now to move basically together in the next phase, there we have clearly to find ways how we can do this on a, let's say, antitrust-wise in the right way, but on the other side also in a quick way, because if this is a burden, then we will lose again the time we need in order to stay competitive with the other regions. And here I see the responsibility of the industry, but also of the European Union in order to give us a push and also to support us that we can speed up in this area. And that comes back to what we said at the beginning. The deployment projects are basically the result of a common approach, starting from research up to certain, let's say, demonstration project, which we can do as a partnership. And this is something which I believe can work, but it needs to be at the lowest administrative burden. And the higher the administrative burden, the lower the diversity of the partnership.
Thank you very much. Giorgio, a word from you on this, and then if we've got time, I'd just like to address the question of skills briefly, if we can, before I put you on the spot and try to draw conclusions. Giorgio.
So very briefly, it's clear that addressing the value of death requires us to think differently about how we build things up. But for me, I would keep it simple. If we've done public procurement and you've created a demand, the value chain will organize itself. Let the market organize it. Make the decisions that create the pull with the public procurement, and things will fall into place.
Sure.
The market will find a way. It always does.
Thank you. Can I stay with you as you're just talking there? And just on this question of skills, the reason I mention it, you had your Student Innovation Awards last night. As I understand it, one of the things there is not only to reward talent, but also to showcase it. And there is a looming problem, and the KETS high-level report pointed to it. The Commissioner has repeatedly pointed to it. This problem of, in a time of high unemployment, nevertheless, skill shortages in key enabling technologies, not enough young people going into science and so on. What do you think? I know it's an issue that Photonics 21 very much is addressing. What do you think the key is to reverse that trend of less and less young people going into sciences? A thought from you on that, then the rest of you, and then we'll try and draw some conclusions before we close.
I actually have no idea whatsoever. I thought there might be people in the audience who spend their life worrying about that. We know that if we're trying to move this industry quickly, we will just not have people ready in time. So we know it's a big issue. I don't have a solution, but I know there's 2 or 3 very vocal people who, from the academic side, who maybe we should pick their brains.
I do also know this is a subject very dear to Malcolm's heart. So a thought from you, please, Malcolm, on this as an engineer by training yourself.
I think that the really crucial thing is to get more young people of school age to want to adopt and move into careers in science and technology, because they see it exciting, they see it's going to give them a really satisfying and rewarding career, it's going to be diverse, it's going to produce new ideas. And to some extent it comes back to the same thing, that the new ideas themselves and the importance of those, I think particularly in affecting climate change. I notice when I've been to meetings of my own institution of mechanical engineers, where we've had young people presenting, that young people working on energy and climate change are really enthusiastic about it. And I think that that's a way actually of getting into schools and young people. But to say, if we're going to solve this, we need you to pick up those sort of careers. Now that isn't going to solve your immediate recruiting problem, because this is going to be quite a long chain problem. But all I would say is I think the climate has changed. And when I was at one of my leading universities 2 weeks ago, they said to me that the application for courses in physics, which is one of your core science disciplines, has gone up really dramatically over the last 2 years. So there may be some signs of change.
Martin, do you share that glimmer of optimism?
To be honest, I can see it in the area I'm looking into. But if he can confirm that, it's a good sign. I think it's really necessary. The question is, why do so many people or young people now move more into, let's say, business administration or management or whatever? So maybe one of the solutions also could be to combine both, yeah? Because I think to drive also innovation via a good management could be also a solution. But I have not the answer. I see only a lot of people who are not so much focusing today on technology, on physics, as you say. And it should be much more, because this is the backbone of our future in Europe.
I'm just wondering if one can make a connection here, Zoran, between the Commissioner, and Martin referred to this earlier, asking for success stories. Maybe part of the answer in terms of attracting young people. Those success stories can play both roles, because you show how important photonics, how important science is for society. Is that part of the answer, do you think?
Definitely, it has to be part of the answer. One additional thing, just to add to what has been said, I mean, we need to have some kind of role models. And I think, you know, we have to create them and make them visible. They are out there, but they are very much in low profile. And then I think when we talk about young people, children, I mean, we have to make science, technology, including photonics, fun. You know, they are attracted to something what is fun, what is rewarding, what is intellectually new. So I think from that perspective, unless we really make it, we will fail. And then just a third element of this multifaceted issue is the gender thing. I mean, we have to see how we can engage, you know, all society in science and technology, including girls and women. And I think it is also, to some extent, specifically for the domain of photonics, to some extent also a challenge.
Okay.
Let me add,
please.
because to say we need to have fun, and at least in some universities in Germany, I know that people and the young students don't even make it to the third semester. Yeah. And what is the fun about that? And we don't need only Nobel premiums in our company. So we also need, let's say, some good engineers, and therefore, I don't know, this is a German issue maybe, but I know this quite well. And it's, if you hear about of these non-success stories, you are somehow, yeah, maybe choosing a different direction, and that's a little bit a pity. I think we have also in Germany right now.
We only have a couple of minutes left, but before we close, I would just try to like to draw some conclusions and go back really to a question that I asked earlier, because Zoran started by saying some of the things he wanted from industry, and then I asked Martin, what did you want from them? I'd like to try and, we've talked a lot about clear strategic focus, priority setting, and so on, in the context of moving forward in this area. I'd like to do it in terms of what you want from each other. So, and perhaps if I could go down the line, I'll start with Giorgio, come down and finish with Martin. If you had to just pick one priority of all the issues we've been discussing to ensure that photonics can play this role that everyone is talking about it having to realize this potential, one priority for the policymakers, but also one priority for you as industry. So one thing you need to do, one thing they need to do, and in a sentence each, what is your priority? And we'll just go down the line before we close. Giorgio.
I think the pump priming is probably the simplest thing to get everyone moving. And so simple decisions there can help all of us get organized and start moving. On the other hand, we need to do things that simplify the access of SMEs.
Okay. Malcolm.
Well, you won't be surprised perhaps to say that I think our biggest task for me as a policymaker is to sort out the public procurement regime. But I'd like to see us working with the Photonics PPP to give some priority to that as, if you like, a demonstrator for this whole area of public procurement. And that would be a great possibility for us to work together and build on that. And secondly, from the industry, I think the ideas about financing and how to create a photonics venture capital, pan-European venture capital fund that could operate across Europe, take advantage of the Commission's proposal, I think that would be something that, again, we could work together on.
Thank you very much. Zoran.
Okay, so if you allow me, I'll not just say what we would like the industry to do, but I will also say what we would like the public authorities to do, including the European Commission. So the challenge for us on the public authorities side is that we have to see how we can use all different instruments which we have in the toolbox in order to support key enabling technologies, ranging from funding instruments like Horizon 2020, FP7, up to the regulation and so on. So that is from our side. Now, what we would like the industry to do, in addition to what you are already doing, I think the major challenge would be to engage more in respect of the outreach. So what we would like you to do is really work more with those people who are working in different domains of societal challenges, have outreach to the end users and small companies, those who can develop new products, new services. So through that, we can only make it as a success.
Thank you. And Martin, you have the last word.
My answer would be speed. Speed in terms of velocity of the processes, and speed in terms of administrative burden. This would help us clearly to move on. And this is a task for both of us, not just for you, but also for the industry.
Okay, and on that note, ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed?